On the 11th of August, 1953, at 18 minutes past 4 in the afternoon, 8 smokejumpers of the United States Forest Service stepped out of a Ford trimotor over a drainage in northwest Montana called Kettle Gulch to catch a fire that 3 lookout towers had been watching smoke off of since noon. The spotter watched all 8 canopies open clean. The pilot circled twice and saw them gather on the jump spot, and saw the cargo chutes come down after them with the tools and the water, and saw the smoke standing over the timber a half-mile upslope of them, thick and gray and sure as a courthouse. At 5:02, the foreman of that crew, a Man Gulch veteran with 11 seasons and a voice like a man reading a feed bill, came up on the radio and said the sentence that the Forest Service would spend the next 50 years keeping out of its own files. "Base, this is Kittredge. We are on the spot and we have walked the half-mile. There is no fire here. There is no burn, no black, no heat, and no snag smoking. Friends, there is nothing here at all." At 5:41, he came up one more time, calm as ever, and said, "Base, be advised, the smoke is below us now." And then the carrier clicked 8 times, slow, like a man counting something out loud with his thumb, and Kettle Gulch never said another word to anybody. The search that went in at first light found the jump spot easy enough. What they found on it, friends, is why I am at this lamp tonight. 8 parachutes, folded regulation, folded the way you fold them at the loft for inspection, laid out on the ground in one straight row. 8 sets of tools, Pulaskis and shovels, standing in a line with their heads driven into the duff, spaced like a tool check at morning muster. And leading away from that jump spot, in any direction, over ground soft enough to take the print of a squirrel, not one single boot track. 8 men, friends. The best woodsmen the government owned. I knew every one of them. I packed chutes beside them. I ate off their mess kits. And I would have been the 8th man out that door if a rookie's knee had held on a practice letdown 2 days before. My best friend jumped my slot. So you will forgive an old man, friends, if he tells this one slowly, and tells it all. Pull your chair in close to the lamp, friends, and before we go up that mountain together, do me the one kindness this account ever asks. Tell me in the comments where you are listening from, and what the night looks like out your window. I like to know how far the lamplight reaches. And if you want the rest of the records this channel keeps, the button costs you nothing, and it keeps the lamp burning. Now. Montana, 1953, and the finest job a young man ever had. My name is Rex Slocum, and in the summer of 1953 I was 19 years old, and I jumped out of airplanes onto forest fires for the United States government. And I want you to understand, friends, before one strange thing happens in this account, what that meant in that particular summer, in that particular corner of Montana. Smoke jumping was young. The program was not yet 15 years old, and it was run out of a grass field in a scatter of lofts and barracks near Missoula. And it took farm boys and college boys and boys back from Korea, and it made them into something the newspapers could not get enough of. Parachute firemen, the smoke eaters, the boys who fell out of the sky with shovels. The idea was arithmetic, friends, and it was beautiful. A fire in the backcountry takes 2 days to walk to, and 1 afternoon to fly to. Catch it at an acre with 8 good men, and it never gets its growth. So we sat on the ready line under the cottonwoods with our gear hung on nails, and when the call came, we were airborne in 20 minutes, and there was not a boy among us who did not believe he was at the exact center of the finest thing the country had ever thought up. And over all of it, friends, that summer, lay one long shadow, and the shadow's name was Man Gulch. 4 years earlier, over east by the Missouri, 13 men had died when a gulch fire turned and ran them uphill, and every man in the program in 1953 carried those 13 names the way you carry a stone in your boot. We did not talk about it at supper. We talked about it at 2 in the morning, in the dark of the barracks, in the way young men talk when they are checking the size of a thing against the size of themselves. I tell you this so you understand the men in this account were not spooked boys, friends. They were men who had already made an honest peace with the worst thing they believed the woods could do. The woods, friends, had something in stock that summer that was not in the catalog. The 11th of August came in hot and blue with the haze standing on the ranges like cream on milk. We had been jumping fires for 6 weeks, lightning strikes mostly, 2-man and 4-man shows, and the outfit was lean and brown and cocky. And I was none of those things, friends, because 2 days earlier, on a practice letdown out of the training tower, I had come off the rope wrong and folded my knee sideways, and the loft boss had grounded me for 10 days, and I was 19, and it was the end of the world. I want to be honest about that, because it matters to everything that follows. I was ashamed, friends. Ashamed of a swollen knee the way only a 19-year-old can be. And my best friend in the program, a big, open-faced Arkansas boy named Junior Voiles, who bunked above me and folded Chutes at the next table, and had taught me to roll a cigarette, and I had taught him to read a slope wind. Junior Voiles clapped me on the neck in front of the whole ready room and said, "Do not sulk, Slocum. I will jump your slot and your fires till you mend, and that way the outfit loses nothing but the scenery." And the ready room laughed, friends, and I laughed. And that is how it came to be that when the Kettle Gulch call dropped at 3:11 in the afternoon of August the 11th, the 8th name on the manifest was Voiles and not Slocum, by nothing in this world but a wet rope and a proud knee and a joke. The call itself, friends, was as ordinary as gravel. 3 towers had smoke, and I will give you their words the way I read them years later in the dispatch flimsies, because the words are part of the wrongness. Tower 1, Opal Rundquist, 22 summers on her mountain. Called it at 12:04, smoke, gray to white, steady column, Kettle Gulch drainage, azimuth 118.5. Tower 2 crossed her at 12:10. Tower 3 crossed them both at 12:14. And a triangle that tight, friends, is as good as a pin in a map. Dispatch flew a spotter plane over at 1:30, and the observer, a careful man, wrote, "Column standing well. Estimate 2 to 4 acres in heavy green timber. No wind on it. Recommend 8 men." Note that, friends. Standing well. No wind. A fire that holds a fat gray column straight up for better than 4 hours in dead air, in green August timber, and does not grow, and does not lean, and does not breathe the way a fire breathes. Nobody caught it, friends. There was nothing to catch. Not yet. Not from the air. Not in 1953, with the boys lean and cocky and the arithmetic so beautiful. 8 men suited up in the shade of the cottonwoods, and Junior Voiles took my leg straps off the nail with my name over it, because his own mane was hung in the loft with a torn pilot chute, and he grinned up at the barracks window where I was sulking on one crutch, and he hollered the last words I ever heard out of that good and generous man. "Keep supper warm, Slocum. This one is 2 acres and a walk home." The flight to Kettle Gulch ran 50 minutes, friends, and I can give you most of it to the word, because the 2 men who came home from that airplane spent the rest of their lives being asked about it, and because I sat with both of them, years apart, at kitchen tables and at bedsides, and their accounts never moved an inch, not on the details that mattered, not on the details that could not matter, not on anything. The pilot was Cliff Yandell, a flat-voiced Texan who had flown the hump in the war and did not have a nerve left in his body to be got on. The spotter was Hoyt Branham, and the spotter, friends, for those of you new to this lamp, is the man who lies in the door of the airplane and reads the fire and the wind and picks the jump spot and taps each man out into the air with a hand on the calf. The spotter is the last of the ground world a jumper touches. Remember that about Hoyt Branham. He carried it the rest of his days like a man carrying stove ash in his bare hands. They picked up the smoke from 20 miles out, and Yandell said later it was the prettiest column he ever got paid to fly at. Straight and fat and gray-white, standing over the green country like it had been drawn there with a ruler. And that he said as much on the intercom, and that Branham, lying in the door with his cheek on his fists, looked at it a long while and did not answer. Because here is what a spotter reads that a pilot does not, friends. A column tells you the fire's weather, the pulse of it, the appetite. Smoke off a green timber fire in dead air rolls, friends. It boils and breathes, dark when it eats something oily, pale when it loafs. It is alive because the thing making it is alive. And Branham told me, 30 years on, in a porch chair in Grangeville with a blanket over his knees, "Rex," he said, "that column did not breathe once in 20 miles. It stood there like a photograph of smoke. Like something holding a shape it had learned," he said, "the way a decoy holds the shape of a duck." "And I did not say a word of that on the intercom, Rex," he said, "because it was 2 to 4 acres in green timber with no wind. And I had 8 of the best behind me in the ship. And what was I going to say? 'Boys, the smoke is too still. We are going home?' And he looked at me on that porch, friends, an old man by then, and he said the sentence I think about at 4 in the morning. Every trap that works, Rex, works because checking it costs more pride than springing it." They circled Kettle Gulch twice at 3,000 feet over the ground. Narrow drainage, steep walls, old dark spruce and fir in the bottom. a long green meadow bench 2/3 up the south wall, and the column rising off the timber at the head of the gulch, half a mile above the bench. No flame anybody could see, but you rarely see flame under a green canopy, friends. That is the whole reason the smoke is trusted. The smoke is the fire's own signed confession. Branham picked the meadow bench for the spot, a good spot, open, soft, half a mile downhill of the smoke, textbook in every regard. Streamers went out, drifted lazy, no wind worth naming. And the 8 went out the door in 3 passes, Kittredge and Keogh and Handley, then Peets and Bullchild and Dahlgren, then Courier and Junior Voiles last, my slot, last man out the door. And Branham tapped his calf and watched his canopy open clean, and watched him all the way down to the grass. And Junior landed soft, friends, gathered his chute, and looked up at the airplane, and waved. The cargo went out on the 4th pass. The ship circled once more, and Yandell and Branham both saw the same last ordinary thing. 8 men in the meadow, chutes off, tools coming out of the cargo bundles, Kittredge already lining them out, everything squared away, the smoke standing fat and patient up the gulch, and Branham wagged the wings and turned for home. And that, friends, is the end of what the ground world knows of the crew of Kettle Gulch by eyesight. The rest is radio, and I was there for this part, friends, because a boy on one crutch makes himself useful where there is a chair, and there was a chair in the radio room at the base, beside Ruby Stannard, who ran the base set with knitting needles going, and never dropped a syllable in 6 seasons. At 5:02, Kittredge, on the crew's pack set. Base, this is Kittredge, and I have told you the words already, but I will tell them again because I heard them come out of the speaker, friends. I heard the room they came out of, and there was no fear in that room, only a professional man frowning at his own arithmetic. We are on the spot, and we have walked the half mile. There is no fire here. There is no burn, no black, no heat, no snag smoking. There is nothing here at all. And then a pause, the length of a man turning in a slow circle, and this, which the official transcript does not contain. Ruby. The smoke is standing right over us, over the trees right here. We are directly under it, and I am telling you there is nothing on the ground making it. Ruby looked at me, friends. One boy on a crutch, one gray-haired woman with her needles stopped in the air, and dispatch came on and asked him to confirm. And Kittredge confirmed it the way a man confirms his own name. Tired even. Certain. Confirmed. No fire. The smoke is another matter. We will eat and hold on the bench tonight and sort it out by daylight. Kittredge out. Ordinary, friends. Almost dull. The Last Supper arrangement of 8 men, and it sounded like a grocery list. At 5:41 the set clicked and Ruby had the log pin in her hand before the first word landed. Kittredge again. And here, friends, I will slow down, because I have carried these 19 words for over 60 years, and this is what they were. Base, this is Kittredge. Be advised, the smoke is below us now. We are going up to look at the light. And Ruby said, say again the last. And there was carrier hum, friends, live air, a keyed set with breath in it. I heard it, and behind the hum, far off, a sound I have never let myself name in 60 years and will not name tonight beyond this. It was steady, and it was many, and it was unhurried, like work. And then the tangent keyed 8 times, slow, even. 1 and 2 and 3, friends, to 8. The way a man counts a crew off with his thumb when his mouth is busy or his mind is. And the carrier dropped, and Kettle Gulch, which had said nothing to anybody for 10,000 years, went back to saying nothing. And it has kept its counsel, friends, from that hour to this one. Now do the arithmetic with me, friends, the way the base did it that night with the map pinned under the lamp. The smoke stood at the head of the gulch, half a mile upslope of the bench. Below us, the man said. For the smoke to be below them, that crew, in the last light of an August evening, had climbed past the head of the drainage, above the smoke, above anything 3 towers had put a pin in, onto the bare shale of the ridge crest, a place no fire crew has business being at dusk, and no foreman alive would take one. And Arch Kittredge was the carefulest foreman the program owned, a man who had walked out of Man Gulch's shadow and buried its dead. We are going up to look at the light, friends. Not the fire, not the smoke, the light. There is no light on the crest of Kettle Gulch at 8 in the evening, but the sun going down over the Swan, and Arch Kittredge had seen 11 summers of that particular sun, and he did not radio his base at supper to report the existence of the sunset. Whatever stood on that ridge and shone down at 8 good men, friends, it was patient, and it had drawn them half a mile past their own smoke to see it, and it made the best foreman in Montana sound, on the last transmission of his life, the way a man sounds pointing out a church window to his children. That is what I heard in his voice, friends, and I was 19, and I have never been 19 again from that evening to this one. Not fear, wonder. They keyed 8 counts, and they went up to look at the light, and the mountain closed over the whole arithmetic of them, and at the base we sat in the yellow lamplight around a silent radio, and Ruby Stannard picked her knitting back up, friends, and her hands would not go, and I watched her sit there holding the needles still, and outside under the cottonwoods the night came on as fair and warm and ordinary a night, friends, as was ever wasted on the state of Montana. The search, friends, was the biggest thing the Forest Service had mounted in that country since Man Gulch, and I want to lay it out plainly, because everything strange about Kettle Gulch is strange against the backdrop of how much honest competence was thrown at it. By midnight there were jumpers rigging gear by truck light. By 3 in the morning a ground column of 40 was on the trail with pack stock. At gray dawn Yandel flew Branham back over the gulch with the best glasses on the base, and the first wrongness of the day was waiting for them in the morning air. The smoke was gone, friends. Not burned out, not rained out, no rain fell. A column that had stood like a courthouse for 9 hours was simply not there, and under where it had stood the timber at the head of the gulch rolled green and unbroken in the first sun, without 1 acre, without 1 tree, without 1 stick of black in it anywhere. Branham told me that was the moment his stomach went, friends, not the night before. A fire that is a problem. A smoke that was, over a fire that never was, is a lie, friends. And a lie 9 hours long over a country that empty is a lie with a purpose. And 8 of his boys had slept under it. They jumped 4 men onto the bench at 6, and the ground column made it in by early afternoon. And I am now going to walk you across that jump spot, friends, item by item, in the order the first men crossed it, because I have read every page of testimony, and I have stood on that ground myself with the men who found it, and the order matters. It builds a shape, and I want the shape to build in you the way it built in them. First, from the air, the meadow looked squared away, gear in order, no men. Second, on the ground, the camp. 8 bed sites in the grass at the meadow's edge, sleeping bags rolled and tied and set in a row. 8, neat as a barracks morning. The cook fire, cold, and here marked the first crooked thing, friends. Kittredge's crew had built their cook fire on bare shale, ringed it with rock, and burned it down to clean ash. A textbook fire in a textbook ring. And the ash was cold and the ring was undisturbed. And that is correct and careful and fine. Except the ash, friends, when a warden knelt and sifted it, held not 1 bone, not 1 bean, not 1 coffee ground, nothing but clean wood ash, and the crew's rations, all of them, were stacked by the cargo chutes unopened. They built a proper fire, friends, and cooked nothing on it, and ate nothing. 8 working men after a jump and a half-mile scout. And I have thought on that cold, clean ash for 60 years, and the only sentence I have ever assembled that holds it is this one. They built the fire because a crew in camp builds a fire, and they had stopped being hungry, friends, some hours before they stopped being a crew. Third, the parachutes. I gave you this in the opening, and now you will have it whole. 8 mains, not draped, not wadded, not weighted down with rocks against the wind the way a working crew leaves silk when there is fire to chase. Folded, friends. Folded in the long regulation fold you do at a loft table with a partner and a smooth floor and 20 minutes to spare. A fold there is no reason on God's earth to perform on a mountain, and laid side by side in 1 row on the grass, edges dressed, like the loft at inspection, like 8 men had turned in their equipment, friends, at the end of a season. And honestly, I could stop this account right there, because that is the whole of it in one picture. Whatever happened on that bench did not happen to that crew. It was joined by them, squared away, signed over, and turned in. And fourth, the tools in their line. Heads driven into the duff, spaced to the pace, a tool check, friends, and the count of the tools was right to the last Pulaski, and the count of everything on that meadow was right. Water cans, first aid, saw, the arithmetic of the government perfect down the whole manifest. And short, friends, exactly 8 men, boots and all. And fifth, last, the thing the searchers speak of in the lowest voice, the ground itself. That bench was August meadow over old burned soil, soft as a ledger page. It took the searcher's prints an inch deep. It held every mark of the landing and the camp. 8 men's boots printed all over the camp circle, friends. And out of the camp circle, in every direction, upslope toward where the smoke had stood, downslope toward the creek, along the bench. Out of that circle of trampled grass there led not one boot track, not 8 men's, not one man's. The camp sat in the meadow like an island, friends, and the meadow held nothing else on its whole green page. 40 searchers and 4 hounds and a week, friends. Then 200 searchers in the National Guard and 3 weeks. And in all of it, off that bench, not a thread, not an eyelet, not a heel crescent, not the wing of one gray jay disturbed. The hounds, friends. You have sat at this lamp before, some of you, and you know the hounds are always a chapter. These took the scent off the sleeping bags, eager as ever, cast the circle, and every one of them, 4 hounds of 3 different handlers on 3 different days, worked to the same arm's reach spot on the upslope rim of the camp, the last place, mark it, that 8 scent lines on this earth agreed. And there each hound stopped as if poured out, and sat, and pointed its face uphill, toward the crest, toward where the man said the light was, friends, and would not bark, and would not budge. And one old handler, a man who had dragged rivers for the county for 30 years, clipped his lead on his own dog with shaking hands and said to the line boss, in the hearing of 2 sworn statements, "That dog is not tracking, mister. That dog is watching something go." And on the 9th day, friends, they found the only track Kettle Gulch ever gave anybody, and it was not a boot. High on the crest, above the head of the gulch, above where any smoke ever stood, on the one band of soft shale clay and a mile of bare rock, the line cutters crossed a path of trodden ground, friends, a yard wide, packed hard, worn smooth, the way ground gets worn in front of a bunkhouse door, a path with 60 years of feet in it, friends, on a ridge no trail crew, no game, no stockman, no survey, and no sane man had any record of. And the wardens walked that path both directions to learn where it went. And here, friends, is where I ask you to hold the lamp steady. It went nowhere, and it came from nowhere. It began, clean as a sentence in the middle of the shale, ran 400 and some feet along the crest, bent once, gently, the way a path bends around something standing that is no longer standing, and ended, clean as a sentence ends, in the middle of the shale. A path, friends, worn by long years of walking, between 2 ends that had never been anywhere, up where the light was, and the man who mapped it for the record, a survey party chief with 2 decades of government line behind him, wrote in the margin of his own field book, against every regulation of the trade, 6 words I have touched with my own hand in a county archive. No terminus, no source. God keep them. Now I must tell you about the men in the gray sedans, friends, because they are in this account the way frost is in a window, and about Opal Rundquist, who is the reason the frost never quite covered the glass. The search was still on its 2nd week when the visitors came, 3 of them, suits the color of a filing cabinet, out of a government sedan with no bureau markings, and the one who spoke gave the name Garrison and a title so long and so mild that no 2 men at the base ever remembered it the same way afterward. They were courteous friends. That is the detail everyone kept, courteous as undertakers, and they wanted nothing anybody would miss, they said. Only the record. They took the dispatch flimsies. They took the spotter's report with its standing well and its no wind. They took the search testimony, all of it, the hound handler's statements, the survey chief's field book with its 6 words in the margin. And they took Ruby Stannard's radio log, friends, the original, the one her own pen had lived on for 6 seasons, and they receipted her for it on a printed federal form. And when the transcript of the Kettle Gulch traffic surfaced years later in the case file, the page for the 11th of August was there, friends, typed fresh, and Kittredge's 502 came through it word for word, and the 541, the last transmission of 8 men's lives, read, in its entirety, as follows. Fragmentary transmission, garbled, station out. 19 words, friends, gone to 3, and the 8 slow counts of the tangent gone altogether. And Ruby Stannard, who logged in shorthand as fast as any man could talk and had the original 19 in her book in ink, was thereafter, and for the rest of her working life, assigned, friends, to the switchboard in town, where the sets she touched carried nothing wilder than the weather and the price of yearlings. And the report, friends, you could look it up yourself where the sanitized file sits today, and I have, and I will quote you the finding. The board finds that the crew was overrun by a rapid reburn event in heavy fuels, and that the remains were rendered unrecoverable by fire behavior of exceptional severity. A burnover, friends. Fire killed them, says the file, in a drainage where 200 searchers and the National Guard could not raise 1 acre of black, 1 scorched needle, 1 smoked stone. A fire of exceptional severity that unfolded 8 parachutes worth of silk into a loft fold and dressed the row. And the men who signed that finding knew it was water on paper, friends. And I will be fairer to them tonight than I was at 19. What were they to write? 8 of the government's finest walked uphill from their own squared-away camp to look at a light above a smoke that was never a fire, leaving no tracks, into a path worn by nobody between 2 nowheres. You cannot mail that sentence to 8 mothers, friends. You cannot read it to a Senate subcommittee that funds your parachutes. Fire is a thing a man can grieve. So fire it was, on paper, forever. And the drainage was closed, posted, avalanche hazard, friends. An avalanche closure renewed every year since, on a slope where no avalanche has run in living memory. And the trail that never quite led there was rerouted 11 miles around, and Kettle Gulch was folded up, friends, folded regulation, and laid in the government's long green row. But Opal Runquist, friends, 22 summers on her tower, and the eyes of the whole country, and they forgot her, the way the suits always forget the person who merely sees everything. It was 2 Augusts later that she wrote to me, a boy she had met exactly once at a fire school, a letter I have yet. And the letter said, in a hand like barbed wire, "Young man, you were his friend, so you had better know what I know before they retire me into the ground." And what she knew, friends, what she had been logging in her own tower diary in her own defiance for years, because a lookout's diary was her own property in those days, and no regulation said otherwise, was this. The smoke of August the 11th, 1953, was not the first smoke over Kettle Gulch. It was the 12th she had personally logged, friends, every one in August. Most in the second week, gray to white, columns standing well, no growth, no spread. And every time she had called them in her first years, the answer came back the same. Negative fire on reconnaissance, false smoke, log it as haze, and after enough years a district memorandum, which she kept, friends, pinned inside her diary like a pressed snake, instructed all towers that recurring optical phenomena over the Kettle drainage were a known atmospheric effect and were not, the underline hers, to be reported as smokes. A known effect, friends, known to whom, the memorandum did not say. And in the back of her diary, in the careful pencil of a woman who counted lightning for a living, was the part I sat down on the floor of my kitchen to read. She had gone into the county records, friends, on her own 2 feet, on her days down the mountain, and she had found August of 1929, a government pack string, 6 men and 11 head, lost in the Kettle drainage. No remains recovered, file thin as a razor. And August of 1908, in the handwritten ledger of the old Forest Reserve, 3 timber cruisers, friends, 3, walked into Kettle Gulch behind a reported smoke in the driest week of the terrible fire year, and the ledger says only, "Party not recovered, entry closed by order." And older than that, friends, older than the government itself, a note in the diary of a Jesuit at the mission, 1860s, that the Salish people of that country would not hunt one particular gulch of the Swan Front in the late summer, because there was a smoke there that was not a fire, friends. And the words the diary gives for it out of the old language translate, as near as the father could carry it, to the smoke that gathers a crew. 12 smokes in her own log. 1929, 1908, the 1860s. Friends, Kettle Gulch had been standing its column up over that country for as long as men kept paper. Always in August, always patient, always the same fat gray promise of honest work half a mile upslope. And I want you to see what that means the way I finally saw it. A fire is the one thing in the mountains that 8 brave men will walk toward, friends. Not treasure, not voices, not lights. You could not bait Arch Kittredge's crew with anything soft in this world. But smoke, friends. Smoke is duty. Smoke is the shape of the thing they had given their lives over to answering. And something above Kettle Gulch had learned that shape, friends. Learned it the way the anglerfish learned the worm, and stood it up in the August air, and waited, patient as a filing cabinet, for the government to do what the government does, friends, which is send its very best. Opal Runquist put her 23rd summer on the tower, and her 24th, and she logged the smoke twice more. Friends, log entries only, azimuth and time, reported to no one, and when she died, in 1966, her diaries went to a niece, and the niece, God keeper, mailed the lot to me. The suits, friends, had receded every page the government owned. It did not occur to them, it never occurs to them, that the country is full of old women with better handwriting and longer memories, and that is the only reason, friends, this account exists to be told at a lamp at all. There is one more chapter in the record, friends, and then the accounts to close, and I will give you the chapter first because I was alive and grown when it happened, and I have flown over the proof of it myself. 1962, 9 years after. A new man on Opal's old tower, a college boy who had never been told what was not to be reported, because you cannot brief a secret without creating it, called in a smoke over the kettle drainage on the 9th of August, azimuth 118.5, column standing well, no growth. Dispatch, friends, had a new generation in it by then too, and a spotter plane went over before anybody with a longer memory could put a hand on the order board. And the observer that day, a steady man I later bought more than one dinner, found no fire, friends, no black, no heat. The column faded off under him the way a heat shimmer fades when you stare at it. But in the green timber below where it had stood, friends, he saw a line. A fire line, cut fresh, the duff bright where the tools had turned it that morning, or near it. 3 feet wide, cut to government standard, to mineral soil, friends, running clean and curved through the unbroken green, with the timber standing untouched on both sides of it, and he followed it with the glasses the full circuit before he keyed his set. And I will give you his words as he gave them to the Board of Review that never published them, and to me across a table in Kalispell. It was a closed circle, he said, miles around, a finished fire line, cut and dressed and clean as the day it was made, ringed around the head of that gulch, around nothing, friends, protecting the green country from a fire that has never come. And the standard of the work, he said, and here he stopped and turned his glass on the table a long while. The standard of the work was the finest I have seen in my service, and I have inspected line in 11 forests, and there was not one soul anywhere upon it. A crew, friends, 8 strong by my arithmetic, somewhere under that green roof, keeping their tools sharp and their line dressed and their silk folded, 9 years on, cutting line around the thing they were gathered to serve. The flight report of 1962 is not in the file, friends. The observer kept his carbon, the way Montana people by then had learned to keep their carbons, and his daughter has it yet, and the closed circle is on it in his own hand. And you may believe an old man that it is there, or you may drive to Kalispell, friends, and be believed instead. I have made my peace with either. Now the accounts, friends, name by name, because the years are the part of these stories no board can seal. Cliff Yandell flew jumpers 11 more seasons, and never once, in 11 years, accepted a dispatch over the Swan Front in the 2nd week of August. And the outfit, friends, without one word being said in any office, never once asked him to. Hoyt Branham left spotting in 55 and became the finest chute rigger the loft ever had. And men noticed, friends, though nobody said this aloud either, that every canopy Hoyt Branham packed for the rest of his working life was folded in the long regulation loft fold and dressed on the table edge to edge, as if each one were the 8th in a row somewhere, and being made ready for an inspection he expected personally to attend. He died in 89, in Grangeville, in his sleep, and his wife told me that in the last week he said, twice, plain as bread, they were gathered. Rex would know, and I do know, friends, and now so do you. Ruby Stannard ran the town switchboard to her retirement, and kept her shorthand book in a bank box, and left it to me in her will with a note that said, for the lamp, when you are ready. And I was not ready, friends, for 30 years. Opal Runquist you have had. Junior Voil's mother wrote me every Christmas to the end of her life, friends, and never once asked me the question. And that mercy is the heaviest thing anybody has ever done to me. And Harvey Trask, the supervisor who signed the burnover finding, ended his career high in the regional office, and one evening at a retirement dinner, his own, with a glass in him, he found me at the coat rack, friends, an old man finding a middle-aged one. And he held my elbow and said, son, I want you to hear it from the man who signed it. I wrote fire because fire was the kindest, true-shaped word I had. But I have read Kittredge's 19 words every year of my life, and I will tell you what I think now and deny at breakfast. I think the smoke is a summons, son. And I think the reason it has stood down these last years, he said, and his hand on my elbow, friends, was not an old man's hand for strength, is that the last crew it gathered is still answering the muster. They are holding its line for it, son, and as long as they hold, it does not need to call. Whether Harvey Trask was right, friends, I cannot prove. I can tell you only my own last chapter, and then the rule, and then good night. I mended my knee, and I jumped 4 more seasons, friends, because Junior Voiles took my slot with a joke and a wave, and I owed the outfit a debt no arithmetic could name. And then I came down out of the sky for good, and spent 40 years keeping the county's trucks alive. And every 11th of August, friends, every one from 1954 to this year, I have driven up the Swan Front Road to a pullout I know, where the crest of Kettle Gulch stands against the evening, and I have sat on the tailgate with 2 cups of coffee poured, friends, one for me, and I have kept the watch until dark. Most years the sky over that gulch is as empty as the file, but 3 times in 60-odd years, friends, 3 times, I have seen it stand up against the sunset, gray to white, column steady, no growth, no lean, patient as a filing cabinet, the smoke that gathers a crew, and all 3 times, friends, I did not report it, and I did not drive toward it, and I did not look at it long, because there is a light up there that 8 better men than I am went up to see, and I do not trust myself, even now, even old, not to want to know what they know. I drank my coffee. I poured Juniors out on the gravel, the way you pour one for a man on a fire line, and I drove home with my eyes on the road, friends, and both hands on the wheel. So take the rule, friends, from an old jumper who was saved by a swollen knee and has never once called it luck. If ever you see smoke standing over wild country, too still, too patient, a column that holds like a photograph and does not breathe, do not go to it, friends, and do not send anyone you love. Report it if you must, once, and let the government's airplanes learn what they learn. But if the answer comes back that there is no fire under it, friends, then you get off that mountain before the light does. Because a smoke with no fire under it is not a report. It is a summons, friends. It is a muster call for a crew, and it has all the patience in the world. And somewhere in the green timber of the Swan Front, there are 8 sets of tools that have been sharp for 70 years, holding a line around it so that it does not have to call the next 8. Keep your lamps trimmed, friends. Keep supper warm for the ones you love. And if you ever hear a radio count to 8, slow, in the evening with no voice behind it, you sit very still, friends, until it is done. And you do not, whatever else you do in this life, you do not key the set and answer. Good night, friends, from the 9th man. His name was Junior Voiles. He jumped my slot. Say his name once tonight, and God keep the standing crew.